Hi, I'm Kendra with Where's Moon Astrology, and today I am talking about the moon in Gemini. So, real quick, I'm going to make a quick distinction between the sun's energy and the moon's energy, as they can be a little bit hard to tell apart, especially if, they're in very similar signs. But essentially, the sun is going to be the conscious will, the ego. This is where you're putting your conscious attention. Being that it's the ego, it's also what you're expressing loudly and proudly, what you are kind of trying to project on a conscious level. Whereas the moon is much more instinctual. This is going to be your emotional reactions, it's going to be how you handle your feelings. Um, it's almost like the sun kind of is informed by the moon because you have that emotional response and then it gets filtered through the ego. So um, that's kind of the difference. I like to say that the sun is projecting the most annoying traits of the sign that it is in because it is doing so loudly and proudly. The moon is just a lot more subtle. So it's going to be more subtle, it's going to be more instinctual, it's going to have a little bit more of that, feminine quality that the moon tends to have. So with the moon in Gemini, um, first of all, the Gemini is a sign that is very communicative, very intellectual, dual-natured, duplicitous, and really likes to learn, really likes to take in information. Can be really detail-oriented. It's different from Sagittarius, its opposite sign. These are two signs that can actually they're actually really hard to differentiate at first. But the difference between Sagittarius and Gemini is that Sagittarius is coming at things from a more broad-minded perspective, looking at the whole picture, sometimes missing the little details that actually are important, whereas Gemini is much more detail-oriented and cares about those little details, almost to the point that they can get a little bit hung up on them. Also kind of like a nervous energy, Gemini and Mercury rule the nervous system, so Moon and Gemini can have problems with anxiety and things of that nature. Um, Gemini moon can change their minds a lot. Um, the things that nurture them emotionally can be kind of all over the place. Gemini can be a bit of a scattered energy. So you don't really know exactly what is going to nurture you until you're kind of in that moment and you just kind of instinctually know. So, I know Gemini moons love to, they'll get really obsessed with a TV show, really obsessed with a hobby or something, and then out of nowhere, I'm done with that. I don't really care about that anymore. That's just kind of Gemini. That's why people kind of have complaints about the sign of Gemini in general, especially in love relationships, is because they seem to change their minds very rapidly. When really it's kind of more, taking in new information and letting the new information inform the decision. So Gemini moon can find a lot of emotional comfort in the influx of information. So reading is something that can be very emotionally comforting to Gemini. Watching documentaries, anything that involves taking in more information and focusing on those details. Um, Gemini can actually be very, very, like I said, they can be really detail oriented. So they can actually understand things on a much deeper level than maybe Sagittarius, because Sagittarius kind of is like, oh, okay, I see this whole big picture and I understand it. Whereas Gemini is really like digging into the little details and, really, really understanding it on a detail level. They do have a little bit more of a problem, however, looking at it from the big picture perspective um, at times. And that's where Gemini and Sagittarius kind of complete each other. They can really learn from one another. And I keep going back to Gemini and Sagittarius axis just because for me that was something that was really hard to understand at first. I'm a Sagittarius moon, and every time I, learned anything about Gemini, I was like, well, that sounds a lot like Sagittarius. And it was something that I had to kind of observe about Gemini, that, they are more detail oriented than Sagittarius and have more of that activity and that nervous energy, which brings me to another thing that can actually, be emotionally comforting to Gemini: activity, moving around. They don't really like to slow their pace. They like to constantly be doing. That's really mercurial as well. So Virgo is going to be kind of that way. Gemini really likes activity. They like communication. They like not only to take in that information, but they like to talk about it. Talking about it helps them learn. And that's going to happen on an emotional level. That's going to be very emotionally nurturing to Gemini, Gemini Moon in particular. So, having somebody that likes to talk about the same things that they do, somebody that, or, multiple somebodies, friends that, have the same kinds of interests and people that they can bounce things off of, people that they can learn from, that's going to be very emotionally nurturing to Gemini as well. Um, Also, Gemini loves to flirt. That is a tendency of Gemini in general. Gemini is very flirtatious, so actually having somebody to flirt with, having having people that they can talk to and exchange that witty banter with and flirt with, that's going to be emotionally nurturing to Gemini as well. They just really like to um, laugh and exchange that witty banter, and they like having people in their lives who can understand that kind of duplicitous nature that they have. The moon also has to do with the mother in the astrological chart. So with moon in Gemini, there's a couple of things that can happen depending on how it's aspected. But the positive manifestation of the mother of a moon in Gemini person would be somebody who really nurtures uh, education and somebody who stimulates you intellectually, somebody who values intellectualism, um, and encouraged you by talking to you and asking you lots of questions. Um, so your relationship with your mother probably would have been very communicative, and you would have perceived her as somebody who is very active. And that kind of informs your own emotional nature, since your mother is integral when you're young in helping you form your emotional nature and your emotional reactions. The dark side of Moon and Gemini Mother would be somebody who is frantic, somebody who was very, very nervous and anxious and kind of put a lot of their nervous energy onto you and kind of made you take that on, which is why you end up being a really anxious, nervous type of person. And somebody who is really duplicitous in like a negative way. So somebody who maybe lied, somebody who went back on their word a lot, somebody who was sometimes there, sometimes not, here today, gone tomorrow, type of presence in your life. That would be like the negative manifestation of Moon in Gemini Mother. Anyway, that was my brief synopsis of the Moon in Gemini person. I really hope that you enjoyed it. Um, I actually am offering individual planetary reports now in my store. I'll leave a link in the description of this video. Basically, I have sun reports, moon reports, Mercury reports, Venus reports, Mars reports, and actually Chiron as well, and North Node, South Node. And basically what these are doing is they're actually going in a lot of detail and looking at one particular placement in your chart instead of, the chart as a whole. So that actually is something that Gemini would probably appreciate. Really isolating one aspect of your chart and kind of slicing and dicing and getting to the details about that one placement really help you understand that. So if you have a kind of a difficult time understanding one particular planet and its energy in your chart, that would be something that's really great for you. Anyway, again, I really hope you enjoyed this and have a great day.